Good evening and welcome to A Political Discussion. I'm Dave Hutchinson. I will be your host this evening. My guest this evening joins us because of word of mouth. I happen to be in the company of a group from Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and the conversation quickly turned to politics and the Massachusetts State Senate. So much of the conversation could have been about our state senator, Karen Spilka, but it was not. Instead, it was about the state senator from the 2nd Worcester District and the type of senator that he is, and also the type of people who represent him, starting with his chief of staff, Shelley McNeil, and Jason Palchas. What you hear also will make you feel good about politics and good about politicians. And I am proud to introduce to you my guest this evening, State Senator Michael Moore. And Michael, welcome to the program. It is an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you, and it's actually an honor to be here with you.
If you would explain to the viewing audience, Michael, who is Michael Moore and how did you get started in politics?
Well, I live in the town of Millbury, which is right adjacent to the city of Worcester. I represent the communities of Leicester, Auburn, Millbury, Grafton, Shrewsbury, Upton, and the southern 45% of the city of Worcester. I'm 48 years old. I have a 7-year-old son, 10-year-old daughter. My wife is an assistant district attorney for the DA in Worcester County, the district attorney's office. Upon graduating high school, I went to college for a while, and then not really knowing where I wanted to go with my life, I ended up pursuing a position for the state environmental police, which required going through a police academy, and from there, with the environmental police, I ended up going to school nights and weekends to obtain my associate's degree, then my bachelor's and master's in criminal justice, and from there I started working for the attorney. Well, actually, I got assigned to the Attorney General's office as an environmental police officer, where I ended up working for 18 years. I started under Jim Shannon. From Shannon, went to Attorney General Harshbarger, to Riley, and we investigated environmental crimes for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And actually, how I got involved in politics was really my father growing up. He was very active in the community. He served on multiple boards. He actually was elected to the planning board in my home community, and he always had us involved. I can remember being 13 or 14, he was actually running the campaign headquarters for former Governor Ed King. Oh. So I was always involved in it, and they made us involved. When I turned 18, one of the first things they had me do when I turned 18 was we had to register for the draft, and then we had to register to vote. And I don't think I've ever missed a vote in an election where I didn't cast my vote. So I give my parents credit for instilling me the obligation of being involved. But then also when I started working for the Commonwealth, I got involved in the union. In the union, I became the legislative director, and then the president of the association. And so I had the opportunity to interact with the legislature. So when it came to issues that the union body had to deal with, I began to build relationships and started to see how it works in the State House, how the process works, from passing legislation to I guess how the general court operates. Everyone looks at it as it's a very long process. It's tough to get things done, but the building's designed that way because you don't want us passing laws every week. You don't want someone coming to us with a new idea and within a week that legislation passing. You want us to have a thorough, the legislation to have a thorough investigative or process to making sure that the legislation they're passing has been thoroughly researched. And then from there, when just prior to getting married, or just after getting married, I moved back to my home community, to Millbury, where I'd grown up, and I was asked to run for selectman. And I served on the board for about 8 years, and the current senator who was Senator Ed Augustus, decided not to run for re-election. I mean, if anyone had told me when I first got elected that I was going to be running for the state senate, I wouldn't have believed it. But you know, he decided not to run for re-election. I had people from the multiple communities approach me about running, and it's now history. I've been the senator now for 2.5 years. I'm just starting my second term, and I've loved every minute of it. And
is it what you thought it would be? There you were, through so many other committees and groups throughout the town and state, and now state senate?
It's 20. You know, you hear the media or you hear the critics say, "Oh, it's a part-time job," or and the stress that it puts on your family life. Any elected official, I shouldn't say politician, every elected official, if you are really going to be successful, it's not just a commitment by the elected official, it's a commitment by the family. Because I leave the house in the morning, I put my son and my daughter, I'll help with them on the bus, get them ready for school, and the majority of the time I don't see them till the next day. You're out at night, it's weekends, holidays, actually holidays when everyone else is getting ready to go away for a weekend. Yeah. You're at the ceremony, you're speaking, you're at the ceremony. At nights you're being asked to come and you're meeting with different groups, explaining to them what's going on in the legislature, the impact of what we're doing, or they're advocating for you on what they think their needs are for their interests are. It's you know, I enjoy it. It's a little bit more than I thought it would be, but if you like interacting with people, it's a great job. It really is.
I don't want you to be modest. I checked on the situation attendance, and you said that it means so much to the people to be active. 100% attendance. You voted on every single thing that they elected you to vote on.
Yes, yeah.
So you must be very proud of that. I know the people, one of the comments that was made that night in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, he's always there. He's there for you. And that's important. No, don't thank me. The people thank you, Michael Moore. Let's take a look at these people. And as you are traveling throughout the state, what are you finding? What are you hearing from the people?
Well, first, it depends on the issue. A lot of people right now from the media are hearing a lot of negative issues coming out regarding, I guess, more towards Washington. From the state level, people, I think a lot of times people are confusing the issues of what's going on down in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol compared to what's going on here. By the end of the show, one thing I hope comes out is how well Massachusetts is doing, respectively, compared to the other states in the country. Our economy, we're moving forward. We're doing so much better than the other states, but you don't hear that in the media. I think what people really want is they want someone who's going to listen to them. I mean, when you go to an event, so often you hear the elected official do all the talking. I think it's really, if you want to address the needs of your constituents, it's actually let them do the talking and listen.
I have a saying, and it appeared in the local paper here in Framingham, that you don't learn too much by speaking. You hear a lot more from listening. Yeah. And that affects everybody. I mentioned to you about your office. When I spoke with them, they gave me the impression I was the most important person in the world, Dave Hutchinson. And I'm saying, what a wonderful way to be treated. And you should be thanked for that and congratulated for that group. Thank you. The jobs, is it jobs that the people are more concerned with than anything else?
The economy in general. It's jobs, making sure that their programs or their issues are being addressed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually one thing I've learned over the last 2.5 years. When I first ran for the office, the economy was going great. Massachusetts actually had one of the stronger economies. Then about a month and a half before the primary, that's when everything collapsed. We had the downturn in the economy, and it went from people concerned about, I think it went to more where people were concerned that we were overspending, or that there was a little too much government waste. And when you get there, when you look at the size of government or the magnitude of services that we provide, it's very easy to make that assumption. But once you get there and you realize the type of programs that the state has to provide services for the developmentally disabled, for the public safety on state highways, for the education of our children from K through 12 right through higher education. But people only really think about is the programs that directly impact them. You know, there's a term in law enforcement they call tunnel vision, and a lot of people actually have that. The only thing they really look at is what direct services actually affect them on a day-to-day basis, and in turn, the programs that they don't see a benefit from, a lot of people consider that waste. But they don't realize the responsibilities that we have as a society and as a government on providing certain services to people.
What you just stated, is that basically what the people are told when they do approach Senator Michael Moore as you travel?
Well, I'll ask them what their issues. I'll ask them what their issues are, and if you know, one individual at a Chamber of Commerce event I was at in the city of Worcester. But they started talking about the waste and the inefficiencies, and so I said to myself, okay, where would you like us to cut? Is it? He said, I said, well, we have to provide service for the developmentally disabled. He goes, well, you can't cut there. Well, do you want all the environmental programs cut or the education? No, public safety. He said, no. I said, well, then where do you want us to cut? See, it's very easy to make the claim, but when you actually, to make the accusation, but when you actually have to look at the budget and say where we're going to make that cut, it's a difficult process. And I think we've, over the course of the year, or the course of this recession that we've had, if you look at Massachusetts, we've made drastic cuts, painful cuts. Yes, we did increase the sales tax, but it was a balance. We used a balanced approach, and right now, if you look at it across the nation, our unemployment is 7.6%. We finished the year, month of June was $792 million above the benchmarks. We had, I think we were $1.4 billion over where we thought we would be. I mean, the housing market, I was just in the paper the other day, and the housing market's doing better here in Massachusetts. It's not as robust as we'd like to see, but it's moving in the right direction. Manufacturing, even in the Worcester, actually, I brought it today, even the Worcester Telegram today. We've got, as you can see, business growth exceeds forecasts, concerns about manufacturing diminishing, factory orders may come back. Yeah. So I mean, we've got some positive, and I think it's due to the legislature and the administration working together that we see that the state's moving in the right direction. So I always try to let the person explain their issue. But then I also try to put forward that, look, you got to look at the positive, because all we hear coming forth usually in the media are the negatives, and that's that's what sells papers. Yeah. That's what attracts people to the TV.
Yeah. The saying, politics is local.
Yes, it is.
That's the saying. If I may, staying in a way with business, small business.
Yes.
Are we business friendly here in the state of Massachusetts?
I think so. I mean, there's MSCN, that TV station that came out with, that had us ranked, I think it was the 5th friendliest state to business. Yeah. But when you hear people, the perception from a lot of individuals is that we're anti-business. If you look at the corporate tax in Massachusetts, we've actually reduced that since 2009. I think it was at 9.25%, where this January it's going to be going down to 8%. So we've consistently tried to reduce some of the burden on business. Last legislative session, and actually The senator from here, Senator Spilka, was one of the major architects of the legislation. We did an economic reform package, which was geared strictly to specifically for trying to stimulate and to support our small businesses. Last legislative session, my first term in office, I was the chairman of the Committee on Small Business and Community Development. Prior to assuming this position, I didn't know that 86% of the businesses or the economy is based on small business. Yeah. Small businesses make up 86%. Yeah. So if we're going to have a robust and a strong recovery, we need to support small business. Having said that, we passed last year, as part of this, we did a regulatory impact statement piece of legislation, where before the legislature can pass any new regulatory or rules and regulations, I should say legislation, we've got to have a regulatory impact statement done. So that means the agency recommending it, there has to be research done into that piece of legislation so that we know what the full impact of that legislation is going to be. Because we don't want to pass anything that's going to have a detrimental effect on any certain business sector. Part of the economic development piece that we did also covered establishing one-stop centers, regional centers, so that if you're bringing a business into the Middlesex area or the Framingham area, you've got an economic development agency or entity that you can come to. They can direct you towards the demographic of the area that's going to help support your business. That they can steer you to tax incentives or to what mass development may have for grants or loans. So,
but do you, Senator, see why the people, maybe the people in the Commonwealth, feel otherwise because of the media? Every time someone quarrels, a business quarrels with the state, it's headlines. Or when they leave the state, once again, headlines. What are we doing wrong? What is Congress doing? What are the senators doing and the representatives? Don't you feel that at all?
Yes. I mean, the only headlines you see are the negative headlines. Those are the ones that make the front page. It's just like, now again, as I just said, when I read these headlines, this is on the business section inside the T&G, but it's 3 or 4 pages in there. The positive news is never on the front headline, the front of the page. It's always the negative that goes up there. And that's what people actually pay attention to that.
I'm going to ask you the most important question that I've asked up to this point. Is the fact that you are here right now, is that in the paper? Did they put that in the paper? Shame on you. It's not there. On all the towns, and there are many that you do cover, are they all feeling the same problem? Do you get the same questions from each district?
Yes. So one topic that's coming up quite a bit now is the Secure Communities Act. And that's from, now if you look at the demographics of my district, I'll have the city of Worcester, which have some minority, high minority percentage residents. Then now you go out to the suburbs, which the income levels could be range very high. So I have a very diverse area. So I have the city where I have a lot of people that would be opposing the Secure Communities Act. But then you go to the suburbs, and it's actually the opposite, where I have a very big demographic that actually supports it. And that's more because of the headlines surrounding what's taken place with the president's uncle and the incident in Milford. That's one thing right now that's been on the minds and conversation.
How do you answer the questions that have been asked on that?
Just answer it honestly. Just tell them what your position is. I think elected officials, that's where elected officials get in trouble, if they try to massage the answer. When I was running for office, I was standing at one of the locations, and people were coming in, and you're trying to meet people, and this one individual, I saw him speaking to the person that I was running against at that time. He spoke to him for 5 or 10 minutes, and he came over to me. He asked me my position on something, and I gave him a direct answer. And he actually said, "Well, you're going to get my vote because I spoke to the person, your opponent, and he wanted this person to give his position first." where instead I gave him my position that he asked. I didn't wait to find out how he felt before. Yeah. So I think if you're honest and you give them an answer, but you got to be able to justify it. You got to be able to say, look, this is why I feel that way. And hopefully people respect you for the fact that you are giving them an honest answer. And you're not just trying to say anything just to get their support.
So your feeling basically for the viewing audience on that situation is what?
On secure communities?
Yes.
Oh, I actually think it's something that we should have joined. It's not, you know, you're hearing a lot of conversations or speculation that if we had joined it, you're going to have immigration sweeps or there's going to be racial profiling, but it really doesn't. The foundation of the Secure Communities Act, really anyone arrested of a felony, and that's, it doesn't look at your ethnic background. Anyone arrested of a felony, would when the police make the arrest and do the fingerprints, they would send the fingerprints off to the FBI and ICE. So if it was Dave Hutchinson getting arrested, or if it was Michael Moore getting arrested, or someone else of whatever ethnic background, if you meet the crime, it would have gone to the appropriate state and federal agencies. I think it's logical. I mean, I don't think anyone wants anyone here in our neighborhoods, because it's really about communities and neighborhoods. Right. We don't want anyone here who's a violent criminal. I mean, that's ultimately the public safety issue. We're not trying to pick out one certain demographic and say, look, we don't want you here. No, this is about people who have committed serious crimes. But now, right now, with the latest update, I think right now it's been politicized quite a bit, because now you've got certain sheriffs who have come out and said, I'm going to implement secure communities, even though the governor won't. But in actuality, INS, Immigration and Customs, ICE, has already come out and said that they are not going to sign any more MOUs because this is going to be implemented on a national basis across the board on 2013. So communities cannot sign on their own. Sheriffs can't go to Washington and sign on their own. They've got to work through the current structure. And right now, in Massachusetts, everyone fingerprinted. And some states may not work this way. In Massachusetts right now, everyone who is arrested and is fingerprinted, the local police departments send those fingerprints to the FBI. So if the FBI right now wants to determine that they want to send those to ICE, Immigrations and Customs, if they want to send them, they can send them to them.
So every local police department in the state, when they arrest someone that has previous convictions, yes, they send them to the state, to the Executive Office of Public Safety for the state who handles the database, and then the state then sends them off to the FBI. Now, the only difference being is that when Secure Communities is actually implemented across the country, they will go simultaneously to FBI and to ICE. Right now, it's in the discretion of the FBI what gets sent over to ICE. I see. Let us go to something else, another subject that is in the paper and causing a lot of controversy: pension reform.
Yes.
Some of the issues that they're speaking about, we hear so many, but I'd like to hear from State Senator Michael Moore your feeling about pension reform.
Well, I think we have to do it. Anyone coming on working for any employer, whether it's a state or a private entity, when you begin your employment, you know of the benefits, you know of the salary and the benefits that's being offered to you. So there's a contractual obligation from the employer to fulfill those obligations. What you're looking at right now that the Commonwealth is doing is that we're doing our second pension reform. We did one last year, last legislative session. This is going to be our second. But when we do the reform, it's got to be based, it can only, I shouldn't say it's got to be, it can only apply to future employees, because we have a contractual obligation that we have to meet. Now, what we're looking at doing in the pension reform is there's language in there that's going to increase the assessment or the how they determine what your pension costs or your pension is. Right now, it's based on your top 3 years of earnings. In this legislation, it's going to move it to top 5 years of earnings. So basically, and this could be, when you say top 3, it doesn't necessarily, it's usually your last 3, but at some point in your career, you could actually have different earning levels. So they take the top 3. Right now, we're going to make that the top 5. There's 4 different job groups in the state. There's Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, Group 4. Group 4 is the public safety. That is our police and fire and corrections. Group 3 is the state police. Then Group 1 and 2 are different administrative or clerical type positions. We are going to look at trying to make their retirement ages correspond more to the Social Security. But right now, if you're a police officer, say Group 3, excuse me, in Group 4, you can technically retire at age 45. Technically. But that's because the multiplier that is used is a 1.5. And then the next year would go to 1.6. And by age 55, with 20 years and 32 years of service, excuse me, at age 55 with 20 years, you would have a 50% retirement. At 32 years, you'd have 80% retirement. What we're going to do is, in this legislation, is move that 45 to 50. And the justification for public safety is it's a more hazardous type of job. It's more stressful, more hazardous. So, but we're going to do that with each job group. Each job group, we're going to move that, take that multiplier where you can get your basic lowest level, and we're going to move that back 5 years. So that is going to help the city, it's going to help the state actually with our unfunded liability. And what we did also with the pension is we took the unfunded liability for the cities and towns, and we actually gave them a longer period now to come in compliance where they have the ability to fully fund their retirement costs.
Now, when you say all of this, and you mention we refers to the committee, or we
the legislature.
To the, okay.
This is going to be the legislature. The House When you say we, it's the way that you have the 3 branches of government. You have the House Representatives. Well, you have the legislative, which is the House and the Senate. Then you've got the executive, which is the governor's office. Then you get the judicial. So this is really just going to be the executive and the legislative. So the House will pass a bill. They'll send it to us. And then obviously we vote on it. Then it goes back and forth. Then we send it to the governor's office.
Boy, it sounds easy. It sounds like an easy thing
to
do.
You think it is, and then just as when we first pass a bill, it's engrossed. So then it goes to the House. The House has to then engross it, and then they have to enact it, and then they send it back to us. But even in the engrossment stage, you can have a little change done to the bill, which could have negative ramifications on the passage of the bill in the next branch. And then on conference committee, when people always hear that the House passes a piece of legislation, then the Senate passes, it goes to a conference committee. When it comes back to the various branches, it's an up and down vote. You don't get to file amendments to try to hopefully make better changes to the bill. It's up or down. It's all or nothing.
We're seeing in the Congress a situation where the House is one way and the Senate the other. So Well,
actually, I think the House in Congress is actually 3 ways. You've got the block of 80, then you've got the other Republicans, and then you get the Democrats.
Which brings up a question that I wasn't going to ask, but I think I will. The situation with the Tea Party.
Yep.
How much power do they have in the Republican Party?
Well, actually, I think they have quite a bit of power right now in the Republican Party. One, in Washington, if you look at the fact that they have 80 votes, the Speaker need support of them to get anything passed to get a Republican majority. During the last election, during the primary cycle, I was hosting an election night show during the primary and the general, but the primary night, the commentator at that time kept talking about the Tea Party and the strength, but it was based on a 14% vote. Everyone was predicting this red tide that was going to wash across the country and even affect Massachusetts. But it didn't. When it got to the general election, there was such a small percentage that they didn't have the impact that they thought they would have. So I think it really depends on the area of the country where their strength lies. Here in Massachusetts, I think if you look at the primary, where we don't have a big percentage of the vote come out, that's where I think you'll see their influence. But when it comes to the general election, where you get a bigger percentage coming out, I think their impact is diminished by the fact that you have a larger electorate coming out to vote.
I know the situation in Massachusetts that we're speaking about right now. I had approximately 30 or 34 candidates for office, state office here, and I think every one of them was elected. I think you'd have to say that it was different throughout the country. You are now a chair of another committee, higher education.
Yes.
I find that very interesting, and I'd like to have your comment on that.
When I first started looking at the committee assignments I wanted for this year, again, one of the major focuses everyone talks about is the economy. And a lot of people don't associate the economy with higher education. But if you look at, coming from my district now, I have, between the Worcester and the Worcester surrounding area, Worcester County area, mainly the towns surrounding the city, I've got 13 colleges and universities. Now, if you look at the economic impact that those universities and facilities of higher education, their impact on the city of Worcester in the surrounding area, it's amazing. Now, the research and development that we get, money that we get in from the federal government that comes into the Massachusetts for research and development. We get the UMass Medical Center in Worcester, one of the highest institutions in the state for receiving NIH money coming back for research. That's jobs. The same thing you have here in Framingham. You've got Framingham State University. They've got STEM programs. They've got research programs they're doing. These programs all bring people into the Framingham area, which these students are going to be spending money here. They're going to be going out through the community. So there's an economic impact that's being provided. You've got, one of the first pieces of legislation I voted on in the Higher Education Committee was to give the authorization to Holyoke Community College to purchase property in the center of Holyoke. Now, the center of Holyoke is an area that's going through some tough times economically right now. But by moving a higher education facility or expanding it in there, that's going to hopefully bring new life to people, new life to the center of that community, because you're bringing new people into the center of town or the center of that city, where they're going to visit the restaurants, they're going to be visiting clothing stores, they're going to hopefully add some needs for some more retail space or some more economic benefit to those areas. And if we're looking at down the road, if we're looking at keeping students here, one of Massachusetts' greatest assets is our intellectual capital. So if we're going to be supplying the high-tech jobs of the future, and we want those manufacturing jobs, the high-tech manufacturing jobs, to come to Massachusetts, we have to provide the workforce. And we've got the infrastructure here in Massachusetts that if we support it, we can provide the students who have the skills and the intellectual capital that will support these industries.
Naively, I'm going to mention to you a subject that's brought up when you speak about education, higher education, here in Massachusetts by the parents of the students, is money. Where in the world do you get $55,000 a year to send a student to Boston University. And Boston University is not the only one. Where does this money, what is the payroll in a college generally, percentage that goes to teachers or professors or doctors?
The majority of expenses in a university would be their personnel costs and their benefit costs. That would be public and private. You know, we have very little control over what a private university can charge for tuition. One of the issues that we have here in Massachusetts is that traditionally across the country, the majority of the cost for an education for a public university is the tuition. And then the fees are the smaller expense.
Right.
Here in Massachusetts, it's exactly the opposite. The state controls the rate of tuition increases that the colleges and universities can increase. So we actually have one of the lowest tuition rates. But what we have here in Massachusetts is we give the freedom to the colleges and university to increase their fees, and then they retain the fees. So we're actually opposite from across the country. We have a higher fee cost for students. This is where you'll have, and we'll get the calls, you'll have people who say, my son and daughter just got a full boat for tuition. Then they find out, well, the tuition's only 1/4 of the cost. The main cost are the fees. So that's something we have to work on, is trying to find a way that we can make it more accessible.
The state colleges or universities are fabulous as far as that goes. Look at right here in Framingham. Look at in Worcester, Worcester State, etc.
Well, one thing that people can do is, and again, I've learned so much about the higher education community just in the 9 months that I've had this assignment, is the community colleges and the state universities are a great way for you to go for your first year, your second year, or even your third year. And if you want to then, if you can or want to transfer to a private school, well, you receive the first 3 or 4 years and receive the good education at a smaller expense. And then if you want to go to the BU or to the Harvard or to the Regis College and pay a higher amount, when you graduate, that's what's looked at from your employers, the school that you graduated from. So you can receive the foundation and then go to and I hate to refer it as a more prestigious reputation.
I understand.
But if you want to go to your third or fourth year at school with a better perception of a better education, you can do that, and it's more cost effective.
For profit occupational schools, explain.
These are the IT techs, the schools that offer specific career skills. Right now you can get grants, or you can get loans to go to these for-profit schools. Right now, across the federally and here in Massachusetts, there's been some issues with the training that they've been providing, whether that when you go to the school or this for-profit institution, that when you come out, there's actually openings in these fields. Whether they're, well, we had a hearing. There's a bill right now that's we're trying to move the for-profit schools from the Department of Early and Secondary Education to underneath the Division of Professional Licensure, because when you come out, you're not getting a degree, you're getting a certificate or a license. So what we want to try to have is better regulation or oversight of the schools, because we've got claims from individuals that some of the schools that they're going to, that they're being, there's deceptive practices being used in drawing them there. And when we had a hearing on a piece of legislation, we had one person testify to the fact that one of the schools that they went to, that their son had gotten admitted to, couldn't pass the program. Then went back to the school again couldn't pass. Well, they found out later on, and it was admitted to, that someone else took the exam for the student. So there's been a lot of issues with the quality of some of the education curriculum, or the quality of the programs that have been that the students have been subject to. So right now we're looking at a major reform of these schools. But if you look at and this is very important because a lot of the industries we have right now in Massachusetts, allied health and just healthcare in general, or there's the life sciences, there's certain fields that you can go in where you don't need the 2-year associate's degree, or you don't need the 4 years degree. You can go into these schools and you can come out with a license or a certificate, and you can go right into the workforce. So it's good that it's important that we are actually reviewing this, and we're trying to ensure that if your son or daughter is going to one of these institutions and they're paying $50,000 or $40,000, that they're not graduating with the debt that they end up can't paying because they can't get a job.
Yeah. And it's an awful situation for a family, people to be put in. Let me ask you, and while we're on the subject of finances, financial situation in the state of Massachusetts, how do you find it right now?
I think with Massachusetts, is doing very well, again, respectively, compared to the rest of the country. If you look at our bond rating over the last year and a half to 2 years, we've had the bond rating companies come out to Massachusetts. The only responses we've got back from them is that they've been very happy with the fiscal management of the budget and the finances in the Commonwealth. We've got one of the higher bond ratings. Right now, we're going to be doing a supplemental budget in the near future. We're looking at putting another $300 million into the rainy day fund. If we do that, and I have to say if because it hasn't gone past the branches yet, if we do that, we'll be one of, I think, 4 states that will have $1 billion in the rainy day fund. And if you look at the size of Massachusetts compared to some of these other states, we're doing well. The revenues for last fiscal year, we met every benchmark, excluding 2 months out of the 12-month period. We actually exceeded. For 10 months, we exceeded the benchmarks that we had been established. And again, as I stated, just in the month of June alone, we exceeded by $790 million. We've started off the fiscal year with the month of July we exceeded the benchmarks by roughly $60 million. Our unemployment rate is at 7.6%. Listen, I'd love to see the unemployment rate at 4% or 3%, but if you look at us compared to across the country, our unemployment rate is far below the 9% national average. But I think we're doing very well. And in January, everyone remembers when the referendum was passed to reduce the income tax from 5.9 to 5.0. Well, when the legislature, and that was before my tenure in the legislature, when they passed that, when the legislature actually enacted it, they enacted benchmarks so that as the state meets certain benchmarks, they can reduce the income tax. Well, if we maintain a rate of estimated revenues where we're going to exceed $1 billion, and I think it's going to be looked at in October. If we maintain the estimates that we're going to exceed $1 billion, we are looking at a reduction in the income tax in January to below 5.3. I think it's going to be 5.2 and a half, or somewhere in the 5.2. So besides the corporate tax being further reduced in January, which is going to be over $100 million in savings to our small businesses and corporations, we're also going to be looking at a possible reduction in the personal income tax of the taxpayers. And yet we're still moving forward with good revenue growth.
Senator Moore, as I listen to you, I feel so good about the situation. But once again, we get back to politics seem to be local, if you will. Yeah. And for the individuals that have been unemployed for 2 years or a year or 6 months, what can you possibly tell them? I mean, you can only show them so many figures that the state, the Senate, the House is working on, but they still need to go to work.
Well, one, go to a workforce development center. Look at the skills that you have. We have a lot of retraining programs out there. I mean, that's one of the problems we're looking at right now, is that we've got a lot of displaced workers who are caught in a quandary right now, because we've got an economy that's transitioning to a more high technology-based economy. Well, this is where the state is offering, and even through some of the community colleges, we're offering retraining programs. And this is where the for-profit schools come in. We have grants and different opportunities that we may be able to provide people to get you that training so you can do a career shift.
Why don't we hear more about those great things that you're talking about? It seems to pick up the paper, turn on the radio, watch television. You don't hear those things. You hear the other things.
Well, what sells the paper? What drives the media? I mean, people don't. You don't have people going back to the radio stations or to hear all the good things.
What makes
and the state, look, we as a public entity, the state, we do a very poor job at marketing what's going well. So the responsibility on us, there's not a lot of marketing on, look, this is going well. This is so.
Maybe there should be. Well, I think there should be a lot more. You had mentioned at the very beginning, and we went over it, words to the effect of being a people person. And it would seem to me that the media, and that includes television, I'm very, very proud of the fact that many people say to us here at FPAC TV that, my goodness, you had someone on, and I didn't know that. I didn't know what he said or she said. So it makes you feel good, because you don't go one way as far as that goes. But we're relying so much on you on the Hill to do the work. And to you, the reason that you were here, I said at the beginning, I was so impressed with the way that the people feel about Michael Moore.
Well,
and I said, I have to meet this individual. I mean, who is he that does these things? But I shouldn't say that, because Karen Spilka here in the town of Framingham and other towns, tremendous.
I can tell you, it's been a privilege working with Senator Spilka. She's, like I said, she was one of the major architects for the economic reform package we did last year. She does a great job representing this district, and it would actually be a loss if you ever see her leave. But she's also committed to the people. I mean, she does care. I mean, there's issues up there that when Karen fights on, she's very passionate about, and I think that's really what.
I've had her here on the program a number of times. Very passionate indeed. And she cares, and she listens. Well, let me ask you this. Television came out with a program not too long ago, very successful program, that asked the question, are we too big to fail? The country, the states, are we? At that point?
I don't think so. You look at, I think any country can fail. If you look at what's going on in Greece, the Soviet Union, they fell apart. I mean, if we put ourselves in a financial situation or have too many burdens that we have to deal with, I mean, I think any country can fail. You know, there's so much talk on the debt ceiling and a balanced budget amendment, and that we, you know, the arguments that we can't have a balanced budget amendment because if a war comes up or the situation comes up. Well, I do think if you look at the states, and this is why a lot of states, I think, like Massachusetts, we have the constitutional requirement that we have to have a balanced budget. Well, I think federally, I do agree that there should be some compromise, and we should have a balanced budget amendment or a balanced budget agreement. But it's got in Washington for the federal budget. But it's got to be done in the proper process. And what people don't realize is that to get a balanced budget amendment through, it's got to go through, I think, 2/3 or 3/4 of the states in the country to get before it can even be passed. Because it's not just like the Washington passing it, okay, and it's in effect. So, and if we're really serious about the debt, if we're going to fund 2 wars, regardless of the fact of whether you think the wars are justified, well, right now you have one sector saying, support the funding for the war, but they're supporting it through borrowing. At the same time that they're criticizing the administration for increasing the debt. Well, if you're going to have 2 military actions going on, then you have to increase the funding for it. You've got to pay for it. You can't. I think right now what the situation we have is, and people are all worried about the country being in a situation where long-term, my children and their children, that the country's not going to be the strength, or whether the country will fail. Elected officials and people have to stop the double talk. You've got to come out forth. If you think you want programs, you want to pay for them, then you got to back up your talk with action. I mean, you can't have a government in 2011 with more programs, more responsibilities, and a tax burden that's less than when Ronald Reagan was in office. Any business, a business operates, that was in operation in the 1970s, knows their costs are not the same as they were in 2011. So there's got to be some compromise. You've got to look at spending, but you also got to look at some revenue increases too.
I know you mentioned at one point housing, and we both, and the people here, thank goodness, when they leave FPAC TV and the program, they'll go home to their house and sit by the fire or whatever they want to do. But here in Framingham, there are many, many foreclosures. Yeah. And you ask yourself, why, but at the same token, what is being done for these people that after 25, 30 years of bringing up a family, living in a house, being great citizens, someone tells them, you're going to lose your house. You have to be out by a certain time. What can we do?
Provide them the opportunity for more jobs. I mean, that's really the individual who's had the house for 20 years, 25 years, and if they've lost a house, it's probably due to the fact they've lost their job. So we've got to give them the opportunity to stay employed and to be able to provide for their family, and to provide the housing for themselves.
Are you going to be affected by redistricting at all?
Yes.
You are?
Yes. My district, and this is again, you keep hearing that Massachusetts is losing population, but we actually gained in our population, just not at the same rate as at the same increase as other states. My district is roughly about, I think there's a deviation factor of 5% that you can be within, but from the baseline goal that they want the district, I'm about 10,000 people, between 10 and 11,000 people above the baseline. So I've had some communities that had 19% increase in their population, and Worcester County in general has seen a big increase. I'm about 10 to 11,000 people above the baseline. Senator Richard Moore, who's just south of me, actually abuts to my district. I think he's roughly 7,000 to 8,000. Senator Chandler, who shares the city with me, she's over by about 2,000. Then you've got Senator Brewer to the west of me. I think he's right in within the deviation factor. So the question is that then further west, you've got the senatorial districts that need to gain in population. So the question is on how they're going to adjust the district. I mean, I should see a reduction in my district because I am right now over the benchmarks.
The representative who heads redistricting has been here a number of times, and when asked the question, is any of this political? And he answered to me directly, yes, it is. And that's a shame. That hurts a situation.
But I guess, again, that this is my second term in office. This is my first redistricting process
Right.
that I've gone through. And maybe I'm being naive in this aspect of it, but where you've got, I don't know how the politics can come into play as far as you've got to meet certain demographics and population requirements. If you, again, just the 3 districts I've talked about, we're all above. So there's got to be some shifting or reduction of the districts. I don't know if it can be as political as people make it out to be. I know there was one piece of legislation that was discussed before we broke in July that looked at trying to make an independent commission to do the redistricting. And I will give a lot of credit to the Senate chair, Stanley Rosenberg from Amherst. Right. He actually handled it in the 90s when it was required. And when the House version redistricting plan actually had to be redone, reconfigured based on an appeal, the Senate plan that was put forth actually held up to court review and was actually commended on the plan they put forward. So we discussed this whole independent commission that was this legislation, and it turned out that across the country, if you actually look at these independent commissions that were formed to do the redistricting, right, there were more appeals of the independent commissions, and actually successful appeals where they had to go back and redraw the plans than when legislatures actually did the plans.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything that we haven't covered? And I have many questions, many more. Maybe you'll have to come back again.
That sounds
That's
good.
my way of getting you. But anything that you want to mention, if you would, look into the camera, if you would be so kind, and maybe for a minute or so, tell the people, the viewing audience, where we are here in the state of Massachusetts, what you think is going to be the case for the next year.
Well, I think Massachusetts, we're on the right road for recovery right now. We've moved forward over the last 2 years since the economic downturn. We've made a lot of tough choices. And when I first got sworn in, my first vote, literally 5 minutes after getting sworn in, was to cut the budget by $1 billion. And then every month after that, for the next 6 months, we had revenues dropping from $100 to $150 million. I mean, we've had to cut a lot of good programs where they don't exist anymore. But we've prioritized the areas that we think are important, and those areas are jobs, education, public safety. I think we've done a good job keeping the focus, but also building the foundation for moving the state forward by doing a lot of reforms. And we haven't stopped. I think you've got a good legislative body that realizes that during this downtime, this is the time to make positive changes.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Senator Michael Moore, for being here on a program that reaches many people with different thoughts and ideas on government, if you will. And I'd like to thank you for being here, and please convey to the people in your office the high respect that I have for each and every one of them. They've been great to me. Once again, this has been Dave Hutchinson, and we've been discussing the state and state government. I want you to remember to get involved with your town. You and your town will be better off for it. Thank you, and good evening.